Question 2. Kalanchoe is a popular houseplant with brightly coloured flowers. Flowering kalanchoe is controlled by the pigment phytochrome in response to photoperiod. To induce flowering, growers must ensure the plants are exposed to less than 11 hours of daylight each day. Describe this pattern of flowering. Alright, so basically this question is based on the phytochrome system, question 2. And the first part here is basically just asking you to identify, is it a short day or a long day plant? Now it requires less than 11 hours of daylight, so it's probably a short day plant. So kalanchoe is a short day plant, or effectively that means it needs a long night before it will flower. It's a long night plant. All right. Interestingly, when I started this question, I was wondering how you actually pronounce the name of this. Kalanchoe actually has 4 different correct pronunciations, so it doesn't really matter how you say it, but I think the most common is kalanchoe. B. Explain how phytochrome controls flowering in kalanchoe. Alright, so basically here they want us to explain the phytochrome system. So first off, I've chucked in a little diagram here out of the notes. If you could draw this, you'd be most of the way there. You just have to add a few words. So the main idea is we've got this inactive form and we've got an active form, and white light will transform the inactive phytochrome pigment into the active form of the pigment, okay? And this will actually inhibit or promote flowering depending on the plant. In this case, it will inhibit flowering. So if we don't have a long enough night, it sticks around and inhibits flowering. So for a short day plant, we need a long enough night that it can all be deactivated and transformed back into this inactive form, and therefore there's nothing inhibiting flowering. The plant will actually flower. Okay, so we'll just run through that quickly. Phytochrome is a light-sensitive pigment found in the leaves of plants. It exists in 2 interchangeable forms, P665 inactive and P725 active. In the presence of white light during the daytime, the pigment is transformed into the active form. In the absence of light, nighttime, the pigment slowly reverts back into its inactive form, P665. However, an extended period of darkness, such as the long nights in winter, is required for all of the pigment to revert back. A short day plant such as kalanchoe, flowering can only be induced in the presence of the active pigment P725, possibly because its activity inhibits flowering. This requires long nights such as those in winter, and this is the reason why kalanchoe is referred to as a short day plant. Okay, so it requires the absence of this active form. We need a long night to get rid of the active form. Alright, C. Petal movement in kalanchoe is a nastic response. Explain the difference between a nastic response and a tropism using responses in kalanchoe as your example. Alright, so what is the difference between a nastic response and a tropism? Okay, well, a tropism is a directional response to a directional stimulus, and it's usually a slower growth response, whereas a nastic response is a much faster, non-directional, usually it's a movement. Alright, so we can put that in here. A nastic response is a non-directional response, a movement to a non-directional stimulus. These responses are usually faster movements that occur as the result of changes in Turgor pressure, the movement of water in or out of the cells. Alright, whereas a tropism is a directional growth response to a directional stimulus. These responses are usually much slower as they are the result of cellular elongation or growth. Oh. Alright, sorry, I've actually forgotten there to use examples of the actual kalanchoe. So tropism here would be the growth of any part of the plant, growth towards the light, growing upwards, alright, against the direction of gravity, the roots growing towards water, or growing downwards with the direction of gravity. A nastic response would be something like the opening and closing of flowers, or things like that, any kind of actual movement. Okay, the leaves could move during the day slightly to track the sun. It depends a little bit on the plant. Sleep movements in plants, some plants lower their leaves during the night and then put them back up during the day. So I've actually done a very naughty thing there. I haven't read the question very well. I've forgotten to include the actual example. Alright, so just watch out for that. Alright, carrying on. Kalanchoe has small flowers with petals that open and close in response to changes in turgor pressure within the petals below. So you can see at night it's closed like this, and during the day it opens up. So this is actually nice for the previous question if you're struggling to think of an example of a Nastic response. Well, they just gave you one here. Alright, you could talk about the opening and closing of flowers. Alright, discuss how this regular movement of the petals is produced by changes in turgor pressure and how this movement enhances the plant's reproductive success. So first off, we've got to explain how the petals open. Alright, so turgor pressure relates to the amount of water within the cell, which is the result of osmosis. Higher pressure in cells on the upper surface of the petal, alright, the upper epidermis, is caused by a net movement of water into these cells, resulting in the increased turgor pressure. Water is probably pumped, active transport, out of the cells on the lower surface and into the cells on the upper surface. This causes the petals to open and the cells on the upper surface to enlarge or elongate. Now some of you are going to be sitting there thinking like, what the, alright, and you'll be thinking, did we really cover this? Well, it is an excellent question, and it's linking two ideas together here. Alright, so if you remember when we did tropisms and how you get that directional growth or movement, you get cells that are larger or elongate on one side of the shoot or the root, causing it to bend in a certain direction. And we've got the same principle here. So we're going to have the cells on the upper surface are going to be enlarged, while the cells on the lower surface are going to shrink slightly. But in this case, it's not because the cells are growing or dividing or getting bigger, or they are getting slightly bigger, but purely because of the movement of water into those cells. Alright, so water is moving out of the cells on the lower surface into the cells on the upper surface, causing the cells on the upper surface to be slightly larger relatively in size, causing the petal to bend or curve and open the flower. Alright, so that's probably quite tricky. Some of you may have struggled to get that point there or explain that fully. It was a bit of an abstract question, but you will get that sometimes in the excellence questions. Okay, the last part we still need to cover is how this movement enhances the reproductive success. So we've got to link this to how's that going to make this plant more successful. Alright, basically flowers attract pollinators, so this enhances the plant's reproductive success as the flowers will be more visible or attractive to pollinators. It may also increase accessibility to the stigma or stamen. This will result in greater pollen transfer and therefore more seeds will be produced, increasing the reproductive success of the plant. Okay, and that's really the second key point there. Okay, flowers attract pollinators, pollen transfer results in seed production, reproductive success. Cool, okay, and I think that's it. So let's move on to the next one.